dark. Red and blue views, truth in the middle. No script, just thought raw and a little civil. Every question's got layers, so we peel back facts. From the real to the surreal, we don't hold back. Voices collide where ideas ignite. You tuned in, now step into the fight. This is more than talk, this is thought that counts. Welcome to the feed where the signal mounts.
Conspiracy theories. Wow, they're everywhere online these days, aren't they? You scroll for like 5 minutes and boom, there's another one challenging, the official story.
Yeah, it really feels like that sometimes.
And today, we're diving deep into a real classic, the Apollo moon landing conspiracy theories. We've got some fascinating sources lined up, including audio from a university lecture, really picking these ideas apart, plus all the sort of lively commentary that went with it. Lots of skepticism there, too.
Right. And our goal here, it isn't just to say wrong and move on. It's more about unpacking the core arguments these theories make.
Okay.
We want to look at them using, science, critical thinking, trying to get a handle on the nature of these beliefs themselves, understand the how and the why behind them, not just give a simple thumbs up or down.
Exactly. And we know you want the insights without, wading through hours of stuff. So we've pulled out what we think are the key bets, some surprising things, actually, that might make you look at this whole debate a bit differently. Okay, so maybe let's start by setting the scene, the whole context for wanting to go to the moon in the first place, the space race.
Yeah, absolutely. After World War II, you had this huge rivalry heating up between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Geopolitics, big time. And space became this major arena for competition. Then, bam, 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik. That sent a real shockwave through America.
Right, the surprise satellite.
Totally. And then Yuri Gagarin orbiting in 61 just turned up the heat even more. It created this real urgency. The U.S. felt it had to prove its tech dominance.
And that's where President Kennedy's, incredibly bold goal comes in, isn't it? Land a man on the moon before the decade's out. Looking back, it still sounds almost fantastical.
Oh, it was incredibly ambitious. Required a massive national effort, talent, money, everything poured into NASA. It really showed how committed the country was to pulling off this, unprecedented achievement.
So, okay, that's the high-stakes backdrop. Now let's jump to how the conspiracy idea itself often gets framed. We've actually got a little audio clip here from a Fox TV trailer. Conspiracy theory. Did we land on the moon? Let's just play that.
Yeah, this clip is a pretty good example of how these theories were often pushed into the mainstream, Very sensationalized, instantly casting doubt on this huge historical moment.
It definitely grabs you, poses that big question right away. Now, before we get into the specific arguments about Apollo, I thought it was interesting how our source material kind of separated urban myths from these bigger conspiracy theories.
That's actually a really useful distinction. Urban myths, like, the penny dropped from the Empire State Building being deadly, or seeing the Great Wall of China from the moon.
Right.
They often just come from simple misunderstandings.
Yeah.
Physics, scale, that kind of thing. But usually pretty harmless. Might even get you thinking. Like the penny thing ignores air resistance, and the Great Wall is just way too thin to see from that far without a telescope.
Yeah. Kind of fun facts, really. But conspiracy theories, that feels different, a heavier thing.
Exactly. They're not usually based on simple mistakes. They can actually have, pretty negative impacts. Distorting history, eroding trust in science and institutions. Sometimes people even act on them. The Apollo one might seem less harmful than some others, but it still chips away at trust in science and historical records.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds then. What are the main arguments people use to say the landings were faked? The evidence.
Well, one of the most famous ones, visually anyway, is the American flag. The pictures where it looks like it's flapping in the wind.
Yes, the flapping flag. That photo is everywhere in this discussion. And it does look odd, you have to admit, for a vacuum.
It does at first glance. But the explanation is actually pretty straightforward. The flag was on a telescopic pole, right? And to make it look good, not just hang there limply, they put a horizontal bar across the top. So the flapping is really just wrinkles and folds that were put there on purpose. And if you look at the actual video, the flag holds perfectly still unless an astronaut bumps it, and then it just kind of swings back and forth for a bit, which is what you'd expect in low gravity. It doesn't flutter.
That makes sense. Okay, another one I hear a lot is about the shadows in the photos. They don't look parallel. So the argument goes, that means multiple light sources, like in a film studio.
Yeah, the shadow argument. This really comes down to how we see things, how perspective works. You're taking a 3D scene, right, and squashing it onto a 2D photo.
Mm-hmm.
If the ground isn't perfectly flat and the moon's surface definitely isn't shadows cast by a single light source, like the sun, will look like they're pointing in different directions depending on the bumps and dips in your viewing angle. We see this on Earth all the time. Uneven ground makes shadows look non-parallel. It doesn't mean there's a film crew hiding somewhere.
Okay, so it's a trick of the light and the bumpy ground on a flat picture. Got it. What about the stars? Why aren't there any stars in the photos taken from the moon? That one seems pretty compelling to a lot of people.
That is a very common question, yeah. And the answer is basically photography 101. The lunar surface is incredibly bright in direct sunlight.
Right.
And the astronaut suits were bright white. To take a decent picture of those bright things, you need a really short exposure time, super quick shutter speed.
Okay.
Just like taking a photo outside on a sunny day here. Your camera settings won't pick up faint things like distant stars.
Yeah.
They're just too dim compared to the main subject. You actually see the same thing in photos taken from the space station in daylight. The bright Earth or the station itself washes out the stars.
Ah, okay. It's about what the camera's set up to capture the bright stuff, not the faint stuff. That clears that up.
Yeah.
Now, a big one, the Van Allen radiation belts. The argument is they're so deadly, the astronauts couldn't possibly have flown through them and survived.
Right, the radiation belts. It's a serious point. The radiation is dangerous. But think of it maybe like firewalking.
Firewalking, okay.
Well, the coals are incredibly hot, right? But people can walk across them quickly without getting badly burned because the contact time is so short. The Apollo missions zipped through the most intense parts of the Van Allen belts relatively quickly.
The speed was key.
Speed and trajectory minimized the time spent in the nastiest bits. Plus, the spacecraft itself had shielding. So yes, dangerous, but the quick transit time was the crucial factor in keeping the radiation dose below lethal levels.
The firewalking analogy helps picture that. Okay, quick transit, shielding. Got it. Then there's the argument about the computers. 1960s tech seems so ancient now. Could it really navigate to the moon and back?
That's a fair question, especially looking back from today. The Apollo guidance computer, yeah, its memory, its speed tiny compared to even a basic phone now.
Right, like kilobytes of memory.
Exactly. But here's the thing. It was a highly specialized piece of kit, designed specifically for navigation, guidance, control. It didn't need to run apps or browse the web.
True.
And remember, complex stuff was being done back then. Think about like the XB-70 Valkyrie bomber, supersonic flight in the 60s, lots of analog instruments, very complex systems. And crucially, Apollo wasn't just the onboard computer. There was a massive team on the ground at Mission Control doing constant calculations, tracking, providing updates.
So huge ground support was part of the system.
Absolutely critical. So the onboard computer, while basic by our standards, was the right tool for its specific job, backed up by immense human brain power on Earth. Ingenuity was key.
That paints a much clearer picture of specialized tool, plus a whole army of experts. Okay, now shifting gears slightly, there was a really interesting bit in the source about a specific conspiracy theorist, Marcus Allen, and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter.
Yes, that was fascinating. So Marcus Allen, he's been a very prominent voice saying the landings were faked for a long, long time. And he'd apparently said, he'd believe it if we got satellite pictures showing the landing sites.
Okay, a clear condition.
Exactly. Then NASA launches the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the LRO, and it starts sending back these incredibly detailed, high-resolution pictures of the moon's surface. And guess what it finds?
The landing sites?
Bingo. Clear images of the Apollo sites. You could see the descent stages of the lunar modules left behind, the tracks of the lunar rovers, equipment the astronauts discarded, even footprints in some cases. Undeniable photographic evidence.
Wow. So what did Allen say then? Did seeing that evidence, the very thing he asked for, change his mind?
This is where it gets really telling about, how strongly people can hold on to beliefs. No, he basically just dismissed the LRO images as fakes too. Faked by NASA.
Wow.
Yeah. It really shows how difficult it can be to change someone's mind once a conspiracy theory takes root. The belief itself seems to become immune to contradictory evidence, even evidence the person themselves said would convince them.
Like shifting the goalposts endlessly. Okay, let's talk about the sheer scale of actually getting there. The rocket itself.
Oh, absolutely. The Saturn V.
Yeah.
Just Immense. It was 110 meters tall, taller than the Statue of Liberty, weighed about 3,000 tons fully fueled. It's still the most powerful rocket ever successfully launched.
Hard to even imagine.
And the power, I mean, each first stage engine burned through tons of propellant every second. A launch like that, you couldn't fake it, you couldn't hide it. These things were tracked by radar, by telescopes, by professional astronomers, by amateur skywatchers all over the world.
Right, it wasn't exactly subtle.
Not at all. The idea that they could somehow launch this behemoth and have it secretly just potter around in Earth orbit instead of going to the moon, the physics, the logistics, the sheer visibility, it just doesn't add up. Transporting and assembling it was a monumental task in itself.
Yeah, that scale argument seems pretty solid, and yet that idea persists. Which leads to the question you hear all the time. If we went back then, why haven't we been back recently?
That's a really common question, and it touches on shifting priorities, really. Once the U.S. landed on the moon, Kennedy's goal was met. The space race was effectively won, politically speaking.
Okay.
Then the focus started to shift. Cost became a much bigger factor. NASA moved towards developing the space shuttle, which was focused on missions in low Earth orbit, deploying satellites, building space stations eventually. The Soviets, meanwhile, had focused more on long-duration space stations like Salyut and Mir.
So different goals emerged.
Pretty much. The later Apollo missions did bring back amazing science, but the intense political drive and the massive funding that came with it faded. It wasn't that we suddenly couldn't go back, technically. It was more a strategic choice, driven by budgets and changing national priorities.
So it wasn't losing the know-how, but choosing a different path for a while.
Exactly. And look at the International Space Station, a huge, incredible achievement built over decades in low Earth orbit through international collaboration. That shows continued capability, just directed differently. And now, of course, we have the Artemis program aiming to send humans back to the moon.
Right, the new push.
Yeah, it shows lunar missions are still very much achievable, technically. It's always a question of political will, funding, risk. But the tech hurdles aren't insurmountable. And we can expect amazing new images and science from Artemis when it happens.
Definitely something to watch. Okay, so pulling back a bit, the lecture material also talked about like the general features of conspiracy theories. What are some common threads?
Yeah, the lecture highlighted a few recurring patterns. One is that they often really take off online, finding communities there.
Echo chambers?
Kind of. And believers often look for explanations that specifically go against the established science. They tend to focus on one single explanation of the conspiracy and ignore or dismiss other, more scientifically plausible explanations for the same evidence.
Like the shadows or the flag.
Exactly. Also, these theories generally don't go through any kind of rigorous peer review the way scientific findings do. And interestingly, someone who believes one conspiracy theory is often more open to believing others too. There seems to be a kind of mindset link.
Okay.
And importantly, these narratives can really appeal to people who feel maybe marginalized or ignored by the mainstream. It offers them an alternative way of understanding the world, maybe a sense of belonging to a group with secret knowledge.
That point about feeling marginalized feels really key. It's not just about facts, then. It's emotional, social, too.
Absolutely. Which is why just yelling "you're wrong" often doesn't work. It suggests we need more dialogue, trying to understand the why behind the belief.
Yeah.
And that's where critical thinking comes in, using logic, scientific principles, Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation is often the best one. Use those tools to evaluate claims without just shutting down conversation.
Right. Encouraging questions, but questions based on wanting real answers, using evidence. Didn't the source mention Mythbusters looking at the cost?
Yeah, briefly. They tackled the idea of faking it. Their basic conclusion was that pulling off a hoax, that convincing involving so many people and keeping it secret for decades, it would likely have been more complicated and probably even more expensive than actually just going to the moon.
Yeah, the irony. And one last point from the lecture about scientists needing to communicate better.
Yeah, that's a really crucial takeaway, I think. If science seems like this complex, inaccessible thing, it leaves gaps. Yeah. And conspiracy theories can rush in to fill those gaps with simpler, even if incorrect stories. Scientists really need to engage with the public, explain things clearly, build that trust through open communication.
Definitely. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels pretty clear that while these Apollo conspiracy theories are persistent, they kind of fall apart when you look closely with science and logic. But, like we said at the start, this wasn't just about knocking them down.
Exactly. We looked at the arguments, unpacked them, hopefully got a better feel for why they stick around. We've seen the importance of perspective, camera limits, the sheer unbelievable scale of Apollo, and, that ongoing human urge to explore.
So here's something to maybe chew on. We live in this age of just information overload, right? Stuff coming at us from all directions, lots of it contradictory. What skills do we really need to navigate all that, to tell solid info from shaky claims? And maybe how do we strike that balance between being healthily skeptical, asking questions, but also having informed trust in actual knowledge and expertise? Something to think about. We definitely encourage you to check out the history of Apollo more and maybe brush up on critical thinking principles.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until our next exploration.
Mic check, one voice, one spark. From the shadows to the bright, let's light the dark. Red and blue views, truth in the middle, no script, just thought raw and a little civil. Every question's got layers, so we peel back facts. From the real to the surreal, we don't hold back. Voices collide where ideas ignite. You tuned in, now step into the fight. This is more